Okay, let's dive into this. There was this terrorist attack in Kashmir, right, back on April 22nd, just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, in Pahalgam.
Exactly. And it's kind of unexpectedly, well, snowballed into this real-world test bed for military tech.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing Chinese equipment going directly up against Western and Russian systems in this, well, renewed India-Pakistan conflict. You shared some really fascinating info, and we need to unpack what these first clashes are telling us.
It's pretty striking how fast it all escalated, isn't it? It's like a live fire comparison playing out right now. Concerning, obviously, but also a unique chance to see how this hardware performs for real.
Absolutely. And for you listening, you wanted to get a handle on the dynamics here,
Yeah.
specifically, how the different military gear is actually doing. So our mission today, this deep dive, has sort of three parts.
Okay.
First, why has India seemingly done so well in stopping Pakistan's initial attacks? Second, why is everyone calling this a litmus test for Chinese military exports? That specific term keeps coming up.
Right, the litmus test.
Yeah. And finally, let's really try to compare the Western and Russian tech India is using against the Chinese gear Pakistan has, based on, what's happened so far. We've pulled out the key insights from your sources to give you the clearest picture we can.
And it's worth saying the results we're seeing, they could really ripple out, couldn't they? Affect the arms trade, maybe even shift power balances a bit.
Definitely. Okay, so let's tackle that first question. Why has India been effective? What's behind their response after Pahalgam? Your info points to a few things, starting with their air defenses.
Yeah, that seems absolutely critical. The information you shared highlights India's pretty robust air defense network, specifically the Russian S-400 system, that's the long-range one, and also India's own anti-drone stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like that incident on May 7th. Reports say these systems knocked down a whole bunch of Pakistani drones and missiles. They were apparently aiming for about 15 military sites.
15. Wow.
Yeah, and the debris they found seems to back up India's claims. So it suggests a really effective layered defense.
Neutralizing 15 targets,
Yeah.
that's a big deal. Paints a picture of a pretty solid shield.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't just about defense, was it? India hit back fast.
Exactly. Their response, codenamed Operation Sindoor, kicked off just hours after the first attacks. And what's interesting is how fast and apparently how precise it was.
Targeting Pakistan's own defenses.
Right. They went after Pakistan's air defense sites, their missile launchers, basically trying to disrupt their ability to launch more attacks. And it seems they managed to get control of the air pretty quickly. Air superiority, let their own planes operate more freely.
It's like a quick counterpunch.
Yeah, it looks like it caught Pakistan off guard.
And doing that effectively? Well, that suggests good intelligence must have played a part, right? Knowing where to hit.
Oh, absolutely. The sources really emphasize India's intel gathering, satellites, real-time data processing. They mentioned seeing satellite images, for instance, that spotted Chinese JF-17 jets on Pakistani bases.
Yeah.
That kind of info is gold.
Right.
It lets you track movements, sure, but also plan your strikes much more accurately because you know what's there.
Makes sense. Knowing where the other guy's pieces are on the board. Now, beyond their own systems and intel, the origin of India's weapons seems important too. It's quite a mix.
Yeah, that brings up the whole quality versus quality thing, doesn't it? Your sources draw a clear line between India's French Rafale jets, their Israeli drones, which are key for surveillance, finding targets, and they're getting U.S. Predator drones too.
Right.
But compared to Pakistan's mainly Chinese kit, like the JF-17 jets, the Rafale especially gets singled out for its radar and its longer-range missiles. That potentially gives Indian pilots a big advantage, in air-to-air fights.
But it's not just the tech, is it? I mean, having fancy gear is one thing, but how you use it, training, planning, that seems critical too.
That's spot on. The info suggests India's tough training and their strategic planning have paid off tactically. Apparently, their maneuvers were unpredictable, maybe confused Pakistani command.
Interesting.
Yeah, adding another layer to why India did well initially. It shows that even the best tech needs skilled people and smart plans behind it.
Okay. And one last piece seems to be, well, alliances. India's international relationships.
Definitely. Those partnerships India has with the U.S., France, Israel, they seem pretty important. It's not just about buying weapons, it's diplomatic backing too. Contrast that with Pakistan, which leans heavily on China. The sources even noted the U.S. calling for peace, but also sort of affirming India's right to self-defense. So geopolitics is woven into this.
Okay, so a mix of strong air defense, quick response, good intel, trained people, and advanced weapons from diverse partners. That seems to be the picture for India's early success. Right, let's shift to that second point. This a litmus test label for Chinese weapons. Why that term?
Well, it's because for a lot of this modern Chinese military gear that Pakistan fields, this is really the first time it's facing off against comparable Western tech in, a real shooting match.
Not just exercises.
Exactly. Not just exercises or low intensity stuff. This is a direct comparison under combat pressure, hence the litmus test. It's a serious check of how they actually perform when it counts.
Okay, so what specific Chinese systems are under the microscope here?
Your sources mentioned several key ones.
Yeah.
The J-10C and JF-17 fighter jets, definitely. Also, the HQ-9 air defense system and various Chinese drones Pakistan uses. These are some of China's big export items.
And the stakes are pretty high for China, right? And I remember reading about that unverified claim Pakistan made about the J-10s.
Ah, yes. Pakistan claimed their J-10Cs shot down Indian Rafalis. Now, that claim is huge, but crucially, it's unverified. No independent proof.
Right.
But if it were true, it'd be a massive win for Chinese tech against a top-tier Western jet like the Rafale, especially operating near India's S-400s.
Yeah.
But again, big if. We just don't have confirmation.
Got it. Unverified. So how these weapons perform, confirmed or not, could really impact China's arms sales globally.
Oh, massively. If the gear looks good here, especially against Western stuff, China could see a big boost in sales. Think Middle East, Africa, places looking for alternatives, especially with Russia's exports kind of down right now.
Makes sense.
But, flip side, if the systems look bad, like those unconfirmed reports about the HQ-9 air defense, maybe failing against Indian strikes that could really hurt China's reputation as a supplier of advanced, reliable weapons.
So big potential upside, but also significant downside risk for their defense industry. And China itself must be watching incredibly closely, not just for sales, but for their own learning.
You bet. They'll be gathering tons of data. How did the radar perform? How did the missiles track? What worked, what didn't? They can feed all that back into improving their own designs.
For future upgrades.
Exactly. And maybe even for tactics they might use themselves, like in their border issues with India. Those reports of Chinese ships popping up near Indian naval drills could easily be part of that intel gathering effort.
So it's like a high-stakes R&D lab for them, in a way. That's quite a perspective. And there's a PR angle, too, isn't there, managing perceptions?
Yes. Sources point to social media in China being used to push any positive stories or unconfirmed wins. It's about projecting strength, capability, both at home and abroad. Maybe regardless of the ground truth sometimes, shaping that narrative.
Okay, so this litmus test is really hitting multiple levels for China. Tech performance, market standing, strategic learning, and image. Right, let's get down to the nitty-gritty then. How does the Western Russian gear India uses actually compare, head-to-head, with the Chinese kit Pakistan has? Starting with the fighter jets.
Okay, jets. Big difference here, potentially. India's got those 36 French Rafales. They're known for having really advanced radars, long-range meteor missiles, generally seen as a step above India's older Russian planes, and also probably a step above Pakistan's main Chinese fighters.
And those main Chinese fighters for Pakistan are?
The J-10C and the JF-17. Now, they're modern planes, don't get me wrong. They've got current tech PL-15 missiles. But their combat record isn't as extensive or, proven as something like the Rafale.
Less battle-tested.
Pretty much. And interestingly, Pakistan also has older American F-16s, but reports suggest they're using them less now because India's S-400 poses such a big threat to them.
Ah, the S-400 effect again. So that system really changes the game. Let's talk air defenses then. How do they stack up?
Well, India's cornerstone is that S-400. Huge range, like 400 kilometers, can track and hit multiple targets at once. Seems very effective at keeping those F-16s, maybe other aircraft too, further away. Plus, India has its own homegrown systems, and those Israeli drones add another layer.
Okay. And Pakistan's main counter to that is the Chinese HQ-9.
Correct, the HQ-9. Its range is shorter, about 260 kilometers. It's considered capable, but maybe not as flexible or long-reaching as the S-400. And then there are those unconfirmed reports we mentioned suggesting it might have struggled against some Indian attacks. That raises questions, even if we don't know for sure.
Right, that potential vulnerability is key. What about hitting things? Missiles, drones, offensive power.
India has the BrahMos missile joint project with Russia. Super fast, accurate, very hard to shoot down, apparently. Then the Israeli drones give them great eyes in the sky, surveillance plus strike capability, and they're getting those U.S. Predators soon, which will boost that even more.
And on Pakistan's side for offense?
They have the PL-15 missile for their jets and Chinese drones like the Winglong 2. Capable systems, yes, but generally thought to be maybe a notch below in tech compared to BrahMos or the Israeli-US drones India has or is getting. Sources also mention Turkish drones Pakistan uses, but maybe less effective against India's strong air defenses.
Okay, so putting it all together, based on these recent clashes, what are the initial takeaways on performance?
Well, that reported strike on Pakistani air defenses near Lahore on May 8th. If accurate, that suggests India's offensive weapons and planning worked well. The S-400 seeming to deter F-16s, the speed of Operations Sindoor. It all points towards the effectiveness of India's Western and Russian gear in this specific situation.
And for Pakistan's Chinese gear.
Again, we have that unverified J-10C claim, but the potential failure of the H-29, if true, is a big red flag about reliability in a tough fight. Pakistan relying more on its Chinese jets shows some trust, sure, but also means bigger potential losses if they really are outperformed by the Rafales.
So this isn't just about comparing specs on paper. It's highlighting strategic choices too, isn't it?
Absolutely. India leaning more towards the West, US, France. It's not just about the kit, it plugs them into bigger security networks. Pakistan leaning mainly on China, maybe limits their options a bit. This conflict is testing the weapons, yeah, but also the strength of these different alliances.
This is really laying out the complexities. Now, before we wrap up, we need some caveats, right? Some things to keep firmly in mind.
Definitely. Super important. First, as we've said multiple times now, those claims, Pakistan downing Rafalas, India destroying HQ-9, they remain unverified. We can't base firm conclusions just on claims or, stuff flying around on X Twitter.
Right. Wait for credible proof. What else?
Second, this is an all-out war. Not even close. We haven't seen the full spectrum of what both sides can do. A bigger conflict could look very different. And, crucially, both sides have nuclear weapons. That hangs over everything. So this is a limited snapshot, albeit a telling one for certain systems.
A crucial point. The nuclear dimension changes everything. And China's perspective. They're likely playing the long game here.
Oh, for sure. Whatever happens day to day, China is learning. They're watching how their stuff performs, finding weaknesses, figuring out improvements. That knowledge is valuable for their future military, maybe even for how they approach things with India down the line.
So even if a system underperforms now, the data helps them make it better later. And finally, the big risk in all this.
Escalation. Simple as that. Both sides might feel they need to prove their weapons are better, which could just spiral things upwards. More intense fighting, wider conflict, and with nuclear weapons in the background, that's incredibly dangerous. De-escalation has to be the priority.
Absolutely. A stark reminder of the stakes. Okay, let's try to pull this all together. What are the main takeaways from this deep dive into the tech side of the India-Pakistan clashes?
Okay, summing up. India's defense so far seems strong thanks to good air defenses like the S-400, a fast response, good intel, and probably an edge from their Western Russian weapons in these initial fights. This whole thing is definitely a litmus test for Chinese military tech. How it performs could really shake up the global arms market and China's image. Early signs maybe suggest an advantage for some Western Russian systems, but we need to be cautious. It's limited fighting, lots of unverified claims.
Right. And for you listening, hopefully you now have a much clearer sense of the military tech involved here and what we're learning early on, how these systems perform, the alliances behind them. It matters hugely for South Asia, obviously, but also for global military trends and security.
Yeah, which leaves us with a final thought for you to chew on. China's clearly watching and learning from this, and the risk of things getting worse is always there.